Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, guys, wherever you are watching from. Sean Maloney, Digital Business Masters with Team 113. Hope you're well. Okay, this video, we're just going to take a very quick look at the dynamics at play within the top blockchain protocols that we currently have available to us. This is 10 years after Bitcoin did something very, very amazing and gave the world an actual vision of what it is to have an alternative means of payment, particularly. But then it also started to show us what it is to start to move towards something called the Internet of Money, or Internet 3.0. The first internet was back in the 90s, for those of you old enough to remember, when we first started getting involved with email and with the strange world of websites and everything else, and it was quite an interesting thing. Then Internet 2 came along, and we all started to get to understand something called mobile internet with the emergence of smartphones. And now we are just about to head into something called Internet 3, or the Internet of Money. And it's very much being driven by something called the blockchain. Okay, so still a relatively new phenomenon in most people's lives. The financial sectors, big business, Industry 4.0, an awful lot of these sectors are very, very aware of it, and they are now developing their own infrastructures around the broad premise that is the blockchain. But what I wanted to do today was just take a quick look at some of the leaders in that space as identified by their circulating supply and market cap within something called CoinMarketCap. So you'll find this data and this information on coinmarketcap.com. I've simply taken a snapshot as of today, which is in December 2019, and I'm just using it as a platform on which to demonstrate what it is to be one of the leaders in this space when it comes to a specific protocol, or coin as we call them, and how they may compare, and just have a quick discussion about what's stopping them becoming what we call mass adopted. Why are more of these digital assets not yet into a place of mass adoption, and what could be the reasons for that? And then we'll circle back onto a particular coin that we're a big fan of, called KBC coin, that is absolutely taking this total blockchain ecosystem by storm, by not only incarnating itself as an asset because of its ability to be linked with gold, but it's also bringing with it a significant amount of utility. So let's just have a quick look at some of the top 10 coins. Forgive this rather detailed report here. I'll pop the link in the files section of T113 and Digital Business Masters, DBN Wealth, and I'll also pop the link in below this video, wherever you're watching it, on YouTube, etc. So you can have a look at this for yourself. But it's a very interesting chart, something that we've followed very closely for many years now. We've been involved with Bitcoin, I'm pleased to say, for several years now at DBN Wealth and Digital Business Masters. And the reason we did that is because we understood the need to diversify away from the fiat currencies of this world. So that was our first venture into this particular blockchain world. And ever since then, we've been watching for all sorts of different projects as they come through, because we understand that this Internet of Money and the Internet of 3.0 is very much going to be a big part of the next decade, okay? But it's always puzzled me personally as to why many of these very, very strong and interesting protocols, projects one might call them, have not taken off into the big wider world. What is preventing that from happening, and what could it be that is stalling the adoption of these coins and these assets in the wider world? Well, honestly, when you break it down like this, you can see very clearly why the problem is there. It's simply to do with utility, an actual use case. People need reasons to use things, okay? So if you understand monetary history and you understand what goes on, for example, with means of exchange that many of us call money, it's actually currency, that developed over many, many, many hundreds of years, okay? And it's been in different forms and different it's been in different ways of its operation over many, many, many hundreds of years. So when you're looking at projects such as Bitcoin, whose main premise is a form of payment and an asset, it's designed primarily to be a means of exchange, then it's hardly surprising only 10 years down the track that it's still not gone into mass adoption. But there's some very important reasons why that's not happened. And in my humble opinion, the Bitcoin fans and the Bitcoin community should be doing an awful lot more to create utility, not just provide the platform, okay? And this is what all this comes down to in the end. I can go through all this list from Bitcoin to Ethereum, Tether, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, EOS, all of these top 10 coins. What they all fail to do in the end is to provide actual use cases in human life. What they're all doing is waiting for use cases to come to them, or they're moving towards different use cases in business primarily to be adopted. Okay, and when you're waiting like that, then you're in the lap of all sorts of influence. We've not even touched yet on legislation and regulation, which is obviously a big part of this. And for many, many years now, Bitcoin has been adopted and it's been picked up by, you could argue, conspiracists and people who have agendas that may be well against the establishment of the fiat system, and that puts them as an outlier. It puts them as a stranger. It puts them in a place of conspiracy rather than being actual use cases and benefit to humankind, and therefore you get resistance. Okay, so all these things stack up to delay and delay and delay, and in the end, all you end up with, particularly in the case of Bitcoin, is a speculative position. You simply end up with a speculation. And that's fine. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of Bitcoin. We've got Bitcoin and we hold Bitcoin and we understand Bitcoin one day may well come through. But we're not getting any younger. So why wait when utility is now being born around us in blockchain protocols, and we can put ourselves in a position of strong ownership inside those entities rather than waiting for all these coins. All these top 10 coins are either waiting for utility or looking to be adopted by existing entities, mainly in the business space. Okay. Now it's worth also adding that what doesn't help is Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Bitcoin SV, which is Satoshi Vision, so Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. Those three coins have forked off, those two coins have forked off Bitcoin as competitors to themselves. So it's all very well saying that Bitcoin has a max supply of 21 million, which is true. And there's a halving coming up, by the way, in May 2020, which slows this down, but also creates potential momentum for value. But all these competitor coins also have 21 million max supply because the forks off the same mainnet. So what you're dealing with here is not just this rather geeky technical project-based blockchain protocol trying to be born into mass adoption. And mass adoption means you have to make it simple. It has to be something that people can see as valuable, and it has to have utility. Not only are they not doing that in terms of creating the means of mass adoption so people can actually use these coins in real life, they're also competing against each other. So you just end up with this cycle of a race to, a race to stand still, because none of these coins, even Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV, even though the top 10 coins, they're huge coins, people have speculatively positioned inside them, at all sorts of levels to hope to make a gain. But the word hope and speculation are not the full story when it comes to what your asset value needs to become. What needs to happen is these coins need to actually take utility. Okay, they remain speculative. Real world use is not there due to volatility for all of them. Bitcoin is especially. The volatility means that they struggle to gain real world use. Okay, But like I say, all of these coins are fantastic. Don't get me wrong. Litecoin, great coin, but it remains speculative. It's all waiting for it. It's based on the blockchain, Bitcoin protocol anyway. It's just a different version in terms of hashing algorithm. And it's there as of, again, trying to become a form of payment. Ethereum, smart contract, absolutely brilliant. There's millions and an awful lot of smart contract based projects going on that use the Ethereum platform. And that's fantastic. And it's helping give birth to the blockchain in the mainstream sense. But in and of itself, it's got no end purpose. Okay, but that notwithstanding, it's still a very interesting asset position to hold, in my humble opinion. But other ones down here, all they're doing is working around the edges. Tether is trying to become the best of two worlds. It's trying to hold itself to a fiat system that is intrinsically falling in value every week. So great, you can pin back your asset on a digital form to a fiat asset, fiat-based asset, but it's not going to give you any case, because fiat is something that has to fall to zero. So if you understand that, then you realize Tether is a short-term anathema. In terms of Binance Coin, Binance is one of the biggest exchanges on the planet, and that's why it's got a massive user base, relatively speaking. But some of these caps are tiny compared to the financial world. So they look great, top 10 in terms of a relatively small market. But all Binance Coin really is a coin that interacts inside itself on Binance and is aiming to become payment. But again, you've got this lack of utility and therefore volatility. Okay, so all these things to come through. Stellar, again, Stellar's a great coin because it allows people to open source and work across asset transfer values. So it works from fiat into other blockchain-based coins, and it's got a function, but it's very limited. It's incredibly limited in what it can do, but it's still got a significant number of people who have speculatively decided to have a look at owning some of it. Okay, so again, I'm not bashing any of this, guys. I'm a holder of many of these coins, but in terms of what they're struggling to do, they're either waiting for the use case, or in terms of utility, or they're trying to work with end user utility and it's not working. So Bitcoin, for example, is a classic. Bitcoin, you'll see in many coffee shops around for many years now, we accept Bitcoin. Well, they do, but they don't like accepting Bitcoin because it's so volatile. You can pay for a cup of coffee in the morning with €5 worth of Bitcoin, $5 worth of Bitcoin. By the afternoon, that Bitcoin could have fallen in value. So the owner, the shop owner of that coffee shop, struggles to liquidate that back to cash to pay his staff and pay his employees because he doesn't know what that coin is going to end up being worth by the time he gets to realizing the asset liquidity. So it doesn't work. So the whole thing, it needs to find utility. Okay. So I'll say all that to say this, that the program we're mainly involved with right now is called Karatbar's Gold Standard Bank, and it's a Carat Gold coin, okay, KBC. Now, of course, it's got its own foibles and its own idiosyncrasies, and it's not perfect by any stretch of imagination. But no blockchain is yet. That's the point of it. But then you make that statement, then you think, well, what is perfect? The fiat system certainly isn't. And if that's your alternative and that's your only thing you're working in, if you're 100% reliant on the fiat system, working with bosses, banks and governments, then you need to seriously look at that. And the whole point, that's a bigger story, but in terms of the point of this particular video, it's about this coin being able not only to provide a link to a stable asset, in fact, the most stable asset that mankind has ever known, called gold. It's been stable as real money for over 5,000 years. And it's something that is fundamental. It was fundamental inside the fiat system until 1971. If you go and Google failed fiat currencies after you've listened to this and have a look at the hundreds of fiat currencies that have failed over mankind, then you'll realize how vulnerable we are being 100% fiat right now since 1971. In fact, this has been the longest period of fiat that mankind has ever lived under. and it's being falsely held up right now. We just happen to be living through that time. So what we do is we try to move out, and that Bitcoin was born as a result of 2008, as a reaction to that, but it's not been able to find mass adoption. So part of that is because it's got no other proof of value. It's got proof of stake and proof of work and etc., which is fine, but it's not actually linked and backed by anything other than confidence, just the same as fiat. So if you take a coin that's backed by gold, that is trusted and used throughout the world, at the moment it's 100 of these coins to 1 gram, then you start to give yourself a chance because you've got a foundation. But it can't stop there, because it's no good just having a coin that people can move back to a gold position. What you also need to do is create the underwriting inside the ecosystem to put more gold underneath it. Okay, so subject to the total supply. Okay, and then what you're looking at circulating supply, you want these two numbers to actually have a value based on utility as well as being asset backed. So the clever thing about KBC is, rather than just wait, as all these top coins are doing, they're just waiting for utility, or they're looking for partners in simple terms to start to use them in the wider existing established business space. Rather than wait for that, what KBC has done is create its own ecosystem based on its own mainnet, using functions and customer-facing activities such as smartphones, laptops, payment gateways, banking services, exchanges, digital stock markets. That to be used, you have to use the coin. So it's not waiting for the world to catch up with it. It's creating the world. And this utility, which is so important, without the utility, even if it's backed by real money, it's not got a strength. You need both. It needs to be symbiotic between asset and utility. Because as the utility is used in the products and services that this company already owns, by the way, then fees are generated. And a proportion of those fees go back to bring more gold out of the gold mine contracts that this company also owns. So it's a cradle to grave ecosystem, from gold in the ground all the way through to fees being generated for something as simple as people making phone calls, which, by the way, are done over voice over blockchain, which is one of the world's first examples of blockchain communication, which is 100% private and secure. So the market adoption comes because of the strength of the actual functions in life. And as people see that and are able to adopt it, just like people did with Apple and Samsung and all these other smartphone devices, just to carry on that example, then people start to use the coin, because to use the phone, you have to use the coin. You don't pay for it with fiat. That demand creates revenue. That revenues create fees. Those fees go back to put more gold underneath the coin. If you're a coin owner, if you own KBC at this point in time, then you stand to be able to watch your asset accrue. But much more than that, much more than speculatively looking at Bitcoin and hoping things come to life, you're actually going to be out there, as I'm doing right now, talking to people about making it come to life because of the preordained utility that already is in existence. So you're creating asset growth for yourself by ownership of KBC, at the same time as using the actual customer-facing devices that the coin is powered by in utility. So it's a fundamental difference, and I'll challenge you to go through. I've just done the top 10 here, but you can go through the top 20, the top 50, the top 100. If you can find any coins on there that are actually creating as a sophisticated ecosystem as this, then do let me know. There's some very, very clever projects. Don't get me wrong. Again, this isn't me bashing anything to do with what these projects are trying to do, from solar panels to legal smart contracts to payment gateways to lots of use cases. There's over 4,000 coins now on CoinMarketCap. Most of them, though, are either too early or they're purely in there to raise capital for startups, which is obviously very, very high risk if you don't know what you're doing. But there are certain kinds, such as KBC, that have actually got not just a foundation to their value, backed by the strongest and most secure asset on the planet. They've also attached it to a utility that is functional in people's hands, best manifested in smartphones, but also laptops, payment gateways, and exchanges. In fact, safe to say, the payment gateway associated with this project, called K-Merchant, is so sophisticated, it accepts Bitcoin, Ethereum, and KBC, which is basically gold. And it guarantees, for example, if that coffee shop sells me a cup of coffee for €4 and I pay for it in Bitcoin, the K-Merchant is designed to guarantee to the merchant that they will not fall below the fiat value of €4 in that example. They will always get the equivalent in BTC to that fiat value. That is how K-Merchant, with Karatbars and Gold Standard Bank, is protecting merchants from volatility in using Bitcoin as a means of payment. So it's actually doing in real life what Bitcoin should already be doing, or functions of Bitcoin should already be doing. That's how powerful this project is. Okay, so like I say, there's an awful lot of coins to choose from on CoinMarketCap. You go and do what you need to do. But at the end of the day, what's very much worth highlighting is there are coins out there right now that are starting to show utility in the real world. And without that utility, these coins simply will not become any more than what they currently are. People will speculate and people will get excited, and McAfee and all these people will shout from the rooftops that mathematically this coin must be worth this, etc., which is probably true. But how long are you willing to wait? At the end of the day, if a coin is going to, or any asset is going to accrue value, it has to be usable and used and have utility and be useful in life. It can't just remain as a speculative asset. It could take years for Bitcoin to come to life, if at all. It could well be overtaken and just go into the annals of history. Other coins, though, are out there not just waiting to be born and linked to different business opportunities. They're actually founding themselves on real asset value in physical form, 100 coins to 1 gram right now. But they're also creating the utility to be used in life to create the revenues that put more gold underneath the coin. It's a very, very different dynamic. Okay, so that's all that is, guys. Just a pure comparison. Like I say, I'll pop the file to this underneath the video where you're watching this, and you can upload it for your own consent. But the main message is understand what you're dealing with, and understand that you need to be part of an ecosystem that's actually creating value in human life, not just speculative, hoping that human life will catch up with it. And that's exactly what all these coins are doing. They're all very interesting. They've all got great promise. They've all got something to give. No question about it. Blockchain is here. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But why wait speculatively? Do that by all means, but get involved with projects that actually already have a function and are already based on a tangible position. Things will happen in your life much more quickly because of the decisions you make in how you position and leverage. Okay, guys, so with that said, appreciate your time, and I'll see you on the next video.